Hey everyone, welcome into another edition of No Holds Barred here at the Toronto Sun. Rob Wong and Postmedia wrestling writer Jan Murphy with you. Pleased to be joined once again by longtime Senior VP of WCW. He is a WWE Hall of Famer, co-host of the 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff podcast, and currently the Chief Media Officer for Real American Freestyle. It is great to chat once again with Eric Bischoff. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be here again.
Yeah, awesome to chat with you. First off, look, we want to pass along our condolences to you on the passing of your longtime friend Hulk Hogan. We know how much he meant to you in your life and your career. You guys were, of course, a big part of launching Real American Freestyle. The last time we spoke with you back in June, you were preparing for the first show, and now some time has passed. How have things gone so far with RAF?
It's been an amazing journey, and I feel so blessed at this stage of my life to be able to embark on such a massive project with so much potential and upside with such a great group of people. I'm working with primarily, with people that are young enough to be my children, but they're really, really good at what they do, and they've got the passion and the knowledge and the experience and the relationships within the world of freestyle wrestling that we're able to combine their relationships and resources with my experience and produce something that's never been done before. And that's like a dream come true for someone like me. So it's a blessing.
Eric, there was a time when you were that young guy trying to, break your way into what would become this epic Hall of Fame career that you've, amassed over time. It feels like in professional wrestling, if you're in, you can stay in if you want to. Why have you chosen to continue to sort of be around the pro wrestling world when I'm sure you could have done, many other things with your life?
Yeah, I've asked myself that same question so many times it's not even funny. Oh my gosh. Uh, part of it is, part of it is a passion, from as long as I can remember back as a child, professional wrestling has always been kind of part of my life. Even though it was, a form of entertainment and escape and fantasy when you're a kid. And then as you get older, your relationship with it changes. And for me in particular, I began to relate to the characters differently as I began to mature physically and started feeling like, whoa, maybe someday I could be that guy. You start identifying with the characters at a very young age. And it's probably no different for comic book characters and movie, heroes for kids and things like that. But it goes from being purely entertainment and escapism to almost aspirational in a way, in a fantasy kind of a way. There for the grace of God go I. I could be that hero, right? And then you grow out of that, usually when women and cars come into your life and start to dominate your thoughts. Then you kind of drift away from it. And then generally the audience kind of finds its way back in their 20s, usually with university and, younger guys living together, sharing a house. It's kind of a communal, hey, let's go back and watch the stuff we watched when we were kids, but now it's more fun. And then before you know it, you're passing it along to your child. So it's like this very generational form of entertainment and art, really, that's just fascinating to watch evolve, especially from the sidelines. And part of the reasons I've gone back is because at different points in time, I felt like I could really focus on or improve maybe certain aspects of the presentation to help target some of those different audiences in different ways. It's like a science experiment, learning how to appeal to different segments of your audience in different ways, but simultaneously. That's the magic of professional wrestling is entertainment.
It's really interesting, the evolution of, the audience over the years with the business. I know you've talked about it recently, how, it is still at the end of the day family entertainment. At least that's what they're trying to do. But there was a period of time where, you were looking for that 18 to 49 male crowd and you were able to reach them. But this kind of goes into my next question about rising ticket prices. And I know you've spoken about that recently as well. And funny enough, I still have my ticket stub from WrestleMania 18. I looked at it the other day. It was 55 Canadian Canadian dollars to get into the nosebleeds, which is just under $40 American. I'm not sure if you can get $55 to spend on a meal these days at the concession stands. That's how much things have changed. But what do you think the end game here is for WWE? Because I think we're starting to see it online, and I think if you just talk to fans in general, they're starting to get priced out a little bit here. And if the goal is to make this family entertainment moving forward, this doesn't seem like the best way to go about it. What is your opinion?
As we speak, the tickets for John Cena's last event are on pre-sale right now, and the packages are insane prices.
What are they? Do
Oh,
share.
like 12, 15,000. I'm waiting in the queue right now. I'm seeing people already posting online like you want to sit front row. It's like $25,000 a seat. Like who can afford this?
I don't know that they expect the mainstream professional wrestling audience that wants to come to live events to afford it. And this is, I know I'm going to sound like I'm playing both sides of the coin because I really am. To really have an honest conversation about this, you have to look at it from two different sides. If all we're doing is looking at it from the side of, oh, that greedy TKO, they're just milking the wrestling fans for as much as they could get, well, then there's nothing I'm about to say that's going to change your mind because you're camped out on that emotional response. And it's a real response. I mean, I get it. But there's the other side of the coin, and you touched on it early on. We're paying more for everything. I was shocked 3 days ago when I stopped in a coffee shop at the Atlanta airport and was charged $9 for a cup of freaking coffee.
Wow.
So, or when I go in and order a glass of wine with my steak, and it's $32, and it's not even really that great of a wine because I'm not a wine snob. So everything has gotten so expensive. But if we focus the conversation on wrestling and then we camp out of the greed aspect of it, not much of a conversation. But here's the reality. Everything has gotten more expensive. The cost of those venues, the cost of the insurance. Certainly, I can tell you from firsthand experience within the last 30 days, the cost of transportation and tickets. And when you think of the scope of people that have to travel with these shows and the fact that flights are probably 2 or 2.5 times more expensive than they were 2 years ago, that cost is going to get passed on. Do I think that TKO is maximizing their opportunity and marketing it in a way that elevates the perceived value of those tickets, even the cheaper ones, less expensive because nothing's cheap? Sure they are, because that's business and that's what you have to do. That's what every other industry is doing. That's what the automotive industry is doing. That's what Apple is doing. Every major consumer product out there is doing the same thing. And they're trying to increase the perceived value of their product while maximizing the revenue they can generate from it while maintaining their customer base. Now, what does all this mean? This means they're going to continue to make as much money off their ticketing structure for live events as they possibly can, because that's the business they're in, including passing on additional costs that didn't exist 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Those costs are coming on. And of course, now if I'm WWE, this is like the velvet rope theory. Studio 54 in New York City made it famous. And that is, you put a velvet rope around certain aspects of, in the case of Studio 51, they'd put a velvet rope outside and make people stand in line for hours in the cold, sometimes in the rain, all dressed up just so they could go in and make an impression at Studio 54, right? And a lot of people use versions of that same theory. Whereas I think in the WWE's case, yeah, they're marketing those $25,000 tickets and $15,000 tickets, not so much because they think, and they will sell them because there's enough people out there to buy them. But as they do, it increases the perceived value of the more affordable tickets. And I know that doesn't sound like it would make sense, but in the long run, it does. And I think that's what they're doing. So I think you're seeing two things. One is, it's the world as we know it, dude. It's everything is more expensive, including wrestling tickets. but it's also managing their business the way everybody else does.
It's funny, the COVID, there was an excuse for, prices to go up as they did. There was a broken supply chain, but we're 5 years on now. The supply chain has completely returned to normal. There's not supply issues, there's not transportation issues, but the prices have remained inflated. And, while we're talking about controversial decisions, tickets, I find them controversial. I really do. They don't give comps out anymore at all. Like talent doesn't get comps. They're very
That's
picky.
because they can sell the tickets.
Right. They're very picky with media. They don't do house shows anymore, which really
Right.
changes the game too. WrestleMania going to Saudi Arabia. I need to hear your thoughts on this. I'll just leave it with that. What are your thoughts on, WrestleMania for the first time outside of North America?
It's I don't feel strongly one way or the other. Again, I have two sides of my brain operating simultaneously. The side of my brain that likes nostalgia, that likes legacy and history, that likes something that feels truly American. And wrestling is a uniquely American sport or product that has spread around the world. And I think that's cool as hell. But it's kind of, to me, it's hard for me to give you an analogy for Canadians, but it's like if the NFL, if the Super Bowl decided all of a sudden it's going to be in London, which probably is going to happen at some point,
Yeah.
it would, I wouldn't be comfortable with it, but it's not like I wouldn't watch it, but it's just one more thing, one more thread out of the fabric of our lives that's being pulled and sent somewhere else. And sometimes you just like to have things that are unique to your culture and in the way you grew up. So for me, it's kind of like, I probably wouldn't do it unless I was, faced with a lot of financial reasons why, as a publicly held company, it's in the best interests of my shareholders, who I am paid to represent. Um, Financially, I could probably be convinced, but I would do so begrudgingly for the reasons I just explained.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear there. It's kind of like watching the Super Bowl somewhere on international soil. It just kind of
Yeah.
ingrained at you that it would be in North America. So, Jay mentioned earlier John Cena's final run here. It's coming up. It's hard to believe it's October 15th already. Only four more dates, I believe, for John Cena that we'll see him on TV. But, we talked about it back in June. Ron Killings was released around that time. And of course, he ended up coming back and had that great match with John around that time. And there was all that hoopla there. But what have you made of this whole, retirement tour? Because, there's been some high highs, but it feels like there's been some low lows. Maybe it hasn't gone off perfectly the way WWE had initially planned, but as we approach the end here, how do you kind of look at everything with regards to John Cena's retirement tour?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, it's certainly ending up very good. Like it's ending up with the feeling in the emotions something like this should be designed to create: nostalgia, gratitude, the feeling of being there to see something really important one last time. Those are all really strong emotions that if they can be capitalized upon and sustained over, a period of weeks or months, is really, really something special. I think John's story stutter stepped on the way out the door, kind of tripped a little bit, didn't pick up its stride till about halfway through. But now it's feeling like it was probably designed to feel. And it's checking all the boxes that I just mentioned. And I think it's going to be great. I think what he did with AJ, I mean, that seemed almost improvisational. and the little, the nuance of writing AJ's intro for him without his knowledge. Come on. How cool is that? Or essentially a montage of every cool finish, over the last, however many years. How cool is that? How could you not, as a wrestling fan, really feel satisfied with that? So I think that's how it's ending generally, at least for me. Everybody else, I think it probably depends on your expectations too. Um, but for my expectations, kind of being able to, in a weird way, put myself in John's shoes just a little bit, I think it's awesome.
Eric, you have been, where Paul Levesque is right now. You've been a decision
Well,
maker.
kind of, sort of, but not, sort of. Yeah.
You've been at that level. You've been at that decision maker level. With John Cena going out the door and Roman Reigns on a, kind of a part-time schedule, Brock Lesnar felt necessary. Bit controversial if look at all his way he was implicated in the Vince McMahon stuff. But I feel they didn't have a choice but to bring back Brock because he might be the last remaining major draw in professional wrestling at this point. What are your thoughts on, Brock is a ticket seller, like he's an Undertaker. He's a spectacle, right? Like he's is that was that move because we're coming out of Cena? Where do we go from here? Who's our next draw? Like who are we going to draw with?
I don't think it's any of the above. I mean, you touched on two things there. One I agree with a lot. The other I disagree with a lot. Um, Starting with what I agree with, um, you made a great analogy there by comparing Brock to an Undertaker, and you also identified them as attractions. Attractions have always worked in professional wrestling. Going back to Andre the Giant, and I'm sure there's historians out there that could give you even more examples, but going from Andre forward, the idea of an attraction, somebody that you don't see week in and week out, for the most part, has been a mainstay of the formula that has worked over the last 20 years, 30 years, maybe 40. But in particular, over the last 15 or 20, when television revenues and exposure have increased. So the more television you have, the more stars you're putting out there, the harder it is to have one stand out. Because there's a lot of them and they're all getting TV time. And there's nobody that really rises heads and tails above everybody else at that moment. So you always have access to a legend or an attraction, somebody that's current, or a legend that's once in a while current, to help balance that and achieve what we talked about earlier on, is trying to find a way to satisfy every segment of your audience simultaneously. So with someone like Brock or Undertaker, or Hulk Hogan when he was active, or what Steve Austin became, or what even John Cena, what Roman Reigns is becoming, attractions. They fit very nicely in the equation, and they can for a long, long time. It's not a sign of desperation, as you implied. You didn't say desperation, but it's like, oh my gosh, who's next? There's nobody next. We better bring back Brock. That infers desperation and panic. That's not what bringing Brock in was. Bringing Brock in was, here's a guy who still wants to go, who is absolutely an attraction, who absolutely sells tickets, and we don't need to rely on him every week. Because if you put him out there every week, he won't be an attraction anymore. That's how attractions work. They're only attractions until you see them so often they're not. So the question suggests, at least it did to me, and I apologize if I'm putting words in your mouth, suggests kind of like, I don't know what to do next. Let's bring in Brock. I think it was a smart move. And when you look at the WWE roster currently, if you sat around a table with 4 or 5 of your friends and a pizza and a beverage of your choice, you could probably pick 4 or 5 people right now that could end up at the top within 6 months, given a reasonable amount of support and care creatively and some team effort. It's just not that hard anymore because they've got so much good talent. The real challenge they have is keeping everybody in a level playing field, so at any given moment you've got options to pick from. That's an awesome position to be in, and that's where WWE is right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, Brock comes back for that WrestlePalooza show, and, all the talk leading up to that was the counter programming with WWE and AEW. Jan and I actually were at that AEW show because it was in Toronto. So a long day of wrestling, a lot to watch that day. That's for sure, with AEW All Out and then leading into WrestlePalooza. But I'm curious, someone that has sort of been on that level where you're battling it out with the other company and you're trying to go blow for blow. Sometimes it's the same night. Obviously, we all remember the Monday Night Wars, but are we making too much? Are people making too much about this counter programming? Because the way I see it is, of course, these companies should be doing this stuff. They're both trying to come out on top.
WWE's not trying to come out on top. They're so far on top, they can't see the bottom. So, again, the premise is a little different for me. I look at it a little differently, and I'm not going to deny that there's probably not some chuckles and smirks, and oh man, I can't wait to see how they react to that. Is there some of that competitive, just one-upsmanship on a personal level that really doesn't mean much? Sure, there is. People are human, right? Tony's mouthed off enough. There's been enough AEW talent that's popped off enough that you're only human if you don't. If you respond to that just in a fun way, you're only human, right? Do I think there's any strategic planning involved and like tactical maneuvers involved to counter program for an outcome? Absolutely freaking not. Here's what I think is really happening, and it's just a fact of life. Look at how much wrestling is out there on television every week between WWE and their various properties, Raw, SmackDown, NXT. I don't even know what they're doing on CW's on NXT. They've got a show on Tubi. They've got their competition elimination show on here. I mean, there's so much wrestling on TV just from WWE, however many nights a week. I don't even know what it is, but it's a lot. And then you take all of AEW programming. And then you throw TNA into the mix, which, by the way, TNA is going to, if they're already breathing down AEW's back for being number 2. They're going to be a solid number 2 in another 6 months. And I'm always right about this shit. Always right. I am never wrong. I am the first person to predict that TKO would ultimately be the buyer for WWE long before TKO was ever mentioned in a headline. That's how right I am. So you can mark that one down. 6 months, TNA, number 2, by a lot. But there's so much wrestling on television that if you decide you're going to add a show or a special, how are you not counter programming? Potentially. Yeah. Unless you put your show on at 3 a.m. or 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. But if you're going for a prime time, where are you going to go, no matter who you are, that isn't somehow perceived to be, depending on who you are, counter programming? Just there's not a lot of room left, folks.
Yeah, there's only so many days in a week, so there's bound to be some crossover.
So many primetime hours in a day.
Yeah,
the Blue Jays counter program the Leafs. I'm just saying. You mentioned TNA. I'd be remiss. My last question from me: Hardys and Dudleys have their final match, retirement match for the Dudleys. Just talk about what those two teams. You can throw Edge and Christian into that mix. What they've meant to the business, and continue to contribute to the business at this later stages in their lives.
Well, I think I've worked with the Dudleys. I'm pretty close to Bubba. We're good, and I'm close to Devon too. But I talk to Bubba more frequently. I'm not a very good phone person, so I don't stay in touch with a lot of people. But Bubba and I do stay in touch throughout the year. Um, I, you know, Bubba and Devon, I think, brought so much attention and reality and intensity and storytelling, along with some really cool characters. I mean, just the Dudley. Pretend you don't know anything about what they did in the ring, and you just dropped in from your spaceship, and somebody said, "Here's the Dudleys. They're professional wrestlers." Your first impression of them would be based on the way they came to the ring, their look, their gimmick, right? And it was a unique gimmick, and they looked goofy as hell until they tore everything up in front of them in the ring. And that contrast between that almost goofiness, with the glasses and the nerdy kind of touch to the character that's a badass. I don't know. I kind of dug it. And they brought a lot of that to WWE. I think they elevated tag team wrestling in a significant way in WWE. I enjoyed the hell out of working with both of them in TNA when I was there. Hardys, I didn't get to work with as much or get to know, quite frankly, but you don't really have to get to know them or work with them to recognize the impact that they've had on a generation of wrestling fans. And for those two teams, and I didn't see the match yet, I will, I was traveling, but I did see the promo going into it. And I made a comment on social media that it was great work, and it really, really was. Did not surprise me because I know what Bubba would have wanted and Devon and the Hardys as well. They understand the value of really putting the work into a vignette like that to bring out the story, to bring out the characters, to bring out the emotion, and to get the audience invested. And that vignette that I saw was really effective at doing that. I think Kevin Sullivan is the one that produced and edited that. But can't say enough good things about both teams, and happy that they were both teams were able to get out there and put the period at the end of their own sentence. They didn't put a period at the end of somebody else's sentence. Nobody else wrote their story for them. They got to go out there and write that story themselves. That's a blessing in and of itself.
Yeah,
Fantastic
absolutely.
stuff. I
That's all you can ask for.
recall, Rob, I saw a meme the other day that said, like, can't remember wife's birthday, can't remember, time kids were born, can't remember this, but never forgot a single word of, entrance for Degeneration X, right? Like, this kind of impact is what the Dudleys and Hardys and Edge and Christian have had on, my generation for sure. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's been incredible to watch, and what a great match that was for sure. Eric, look, we always appreciate the time, man. Always great insights, and you heard it here first, folks. TNA going to be the number two behind WWE in 6 months. So we'll reconvene in 6 months, Eric, and then you can tell us you were right. You called it right here.
I agree.
You can schedule it now if you'd like.
Thanks so much, Eric. We appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks,
All
Eric.
right. Thank you, guys.